Hey, what's going on, everybody? Hope everybody is doing well. Today we're going to be talking about how I brought a Nullstar Nekros build all the way to level cap in the Steel Path. I feel like putting the Nullstar helmet ability on Nekros is not your traditional way to play Nekros, especially if you're doing something as difficult as going to level cap. But nonetheless, I still pulled it off, and I actually did it with 3 augment mods on top of that. And I also replaced the Desecrate ability with Nullstar, which I also feel like isn't normal for a Nekros build. So again, I'm going to get into that. I do want to mention though that I did make a video recently of me bringing Nekros to level cap. I'll leave that linked in the description. This video is more so to talk about the build itself and why I specifically brought this build. And this time around, I'm going to be showcasing a lot more gameplay of me in the actual level cap run while I talk about the build. So with all that being said, let's get into it. Let's go ahead and start by talking about the Nullstar ability. This is Nova's helmet ability, and using this ability creates 12 particles around you, and these particles will automatically launch themselves at nearby enemies as long as they're within your range. Whenever the particles make contact with an enemy, they have a 100% status chance, and on top of that, these particles also give you damage reduction, and depending on how many you have, you can actually get up to 90% on Nova and 75% on any other Warframe. And since I have the default amount of range and duration, we only get the 12 particles with this ability. But nonetheless, it's still pretty good because of that guaranteed status chance and the fact that we stagger enemies on contact. And for my build, I'm also bringing the Neutron Star augment mod for this ability. This augment mod allows the ability to do heat damage with a guaranteed heat status effect as well. So that means I'll be doing both blast and heat damage, and I'll be applying a guaranteed blast proc and heat proc on enemies that don't die from the ability. And by recasting the ability and sending out the stars you had before you recasted the ability, you get a little bit of extra range with those particles as well. So recasting the ability over and over, especially if you're trying to stagger enemies, is pretty good. The damage reduction, the staggering on contact, and the heat plus blast status effects and damage are really good when you pair them with the Terrify ability on Nekros. Terrify is already just an amazing ability on its own. And if you're fighting enemies like the Corpus who don't have armor, it's still good to cast Terrify and then follow up with Nullstar, because the enemies affected by Terrify will be put in a state of panic, which makes it easier to hit the Nullstar ability. But on top of that, they'll also be slowed by 80% because I have the Creeping Terrify augment mod. This augment mod is really amazing for slowing down a group of enemies or slowing down one specific enemy that you're trying to focus on. And for me in this case, that happens to be the Thrax Centurion. Using Terrify on them to strip the armor is just an easy way to kill them. And speaking of killing the Thrax Centurion, another way to kill them super easily is actually with the Soul Punch ability. I seriously underestimated the Soul Punch ability for the longest time on Nekros. I used to replace this ability on a lot of Nekros builds when I was just farming, for example. If I wanted to use something like Nourish on Nekros, I would put it over Soul Punch. But nowadays, that's just never gonna happen again because Soul Punch is so amazing. Especially if you're going for a shield gating build like I am with Nekros. I know a lot of people like to run a health tank Nekros build with something like Arcane Persistence, Arcane Blessing, and then you replace the 4th ability with something like Gloom, and then you have the Despoil augment mod for the 3rd ability, so that way you can keep energy while recovering health pretty consistently. And overall, you could argue that this build is on paper just fundamentally better than this silly little Nekros build that I brought all the way to level cap. And yes, I could have replaced many mods on my setup, not only on Nekros, but on the weapons that I brought as well. But the truth is I really enjoyed the way I modded Nekros and the way I modded my weapons. And the fact that it got all the way to level cap should prove that as long as you really understand your build, you can complete any challenge you set for yourself in this game. If there's a build out there that you simply enjoy more, you could probably make it just as efficient as a spreadsheet build while having more fun with it. You know what I mean? I just wanted to say that because I know a lot of people are probably going to recommend that I put this mod on this weapon or I change this mod on Nekros out for something else. And my response to that is I play this game how I want, which means I build my Warframe, weapons, and anything in this game how I want. And I recommend anybody do that too, because that's simply just the most fun and enjoyable route. And of course, feel free to let me know what you guys think about this build and what you would change about it as well. Because I get it, it's a pretty weird and not normal build, you know what I mean? Yet it still worked. Isn't that pretty cool? That's just how I think about it at least, and I just wanted to share my opinion, but feel free to let me know what you guys think down below. Anyways, back to talking about Soul Punch. This ability is so amazing for shield gating on Nekros. In my personal opinion, when it comes to shield gating anyway, you want to have an ability that you can spam infinitely, and fun fact, we can actually spam Soul Punch way more than we could spam something like Nullstar. For those of you who don't know, Nullstar actually has a 2.5 second cooldown between casts, so you have to wait that 2.5 second duration before you can cast the ability again, but that is not the case for Soul Punch. You could just spam that shit infinitely and it works. So to make sure that I can shield gate efficiently with this ability, I recommend the bread and butter combo when it comes to shield gating, at least in my opinion anyway, which is the Aura mod Brief Respite, followed by the Warframe mods Fast Deflection and Vigilante Vigor, and then finally pairing those with Arcane Aegis. It's just a really consistent way to stay alive with shield gating. I mean, let's just keep it real. Especially if you're not doing anything in the Steel Path, it's almost guaranteed that you're not going to die. But since I'm doing a level cap cascade, obviously that's not the case, and I could die pretty easily if my movement movement isn't perfect. For example, this is a cascade run I'm in, and standing still is really not the way to go. Simply just relying on my shield recovery, my damage reduction is going to get me killed. Especially as the enemy levels start increasing, you're going to notice that all of your survivability methods are really not that reliable as when you first started. But that's literally the whole point of the challenge, you know what I mean? You'll notice in this run that I use the Atomicycle a lot because it's simply an OP method for survivability. You're invulnerable while you get on the bike. The bike has an ability that turns you invisible, which can be used on any single Warframe, by the way. And since Nekros can't go invisible naturally, this is really amazing as an extra survivability tool. Because when I go invisible, I can just focus on doing the Void Cascade objective and then proceed on from there. But just because I have one method of survivability that's really good doesn't mean I want to rely on that solely. I rely on all the options that I have at my disposal, so that way we have the best chance of getting the challenge done. And that's exactly why Soul Punch is so amazing. I used this ability so much throughout the run, and there was two main reasons for that. One is, of course, the reason I just told you with the shield gating, but the other is for something that I didn't know about until I started doing this challenge, which is the fact that you can actually not only one-shot the Thrax Centurion enemies that are the really annoying enemies for this mission type, you can simply just one-shot them once they're at 25% or less health, which is pretty badass in itself. But what's even cooler than that is turning one of the Thrax Centurion into a shadow summon. When I very first started to do the Cascade mission type with Nekros, I thought I was going to be able to resummon the Thrax Centurion with the 4th ability Shadows of the Dead after I killed the ghost form, but it did not work out that way at all, because the 4th ability with Nekros is quite literally just not capable of doing that with the Thrax Centurion enemy type, which was a real disappointment for me at the time, because in my head I'm just sitting here thinking like, damn, it would have been really cool if I could have had a Thrax Centurion summon, you know, they're pretty strong anyways. Needless to say, I was really excited to find out that I could actually make this a reality, and man, did it come clutch throughout the entire run. My Thrax Centurion summons were bullying the actual Thrax Centurion that were spawning in the game. And I'm gonna get into summons and the 4th ability in a second, but I just wanted to bring this part up because this is really cool. And this whole process just made me like the Soul Punch ability even more than I already did. So without a doubt, thanks to the perks of this ability, it was pretty amazing throughout the entire run. And now let's go ahead and get into the most controversial part of the video, which is talking about Shadows of the Dead and why I even brought an ability like this all the way to level cap. So why did I choose to bring this build with Nullstar over Desecrate instead? Because I really enjoy this Nullstar build. I haven't actually experimented with Nullstar as a helmet ability until recently, as a matter of fact until last month, because when I went to level cap for the first time, I went with my main Warframe Chroma, and the build I brought for Chroma was actually a persistence health tanking build that had Nullstar. So I didn't want to do the exact same thing again on this Nekros build, you know what I mean? So if I could get away with the shield gating, that would just be even better for me. And yeah, I got away with the shield gating no problem. You can even use this other build that I'm talking about with Gloom without using Arcane Persistence and still get to level cap, you know what I mean? I just feel like at the end of the day, it's really up to you. So while I feel like a lot of people are gonna recommend that I use something else entirely because this is better, this is useless, this is yada yada yada, at the end of the day, you should have your own opinion when it comes to this game and what you use for the type of stuff that you're doing. Whether it's a level cap run, an arbitration, Netracell, a Deep Archimedia run, it doesn't matter. Bring whatever you gotta bring to get the mission done. So by that logic, why wouldn't I bring a build that I personally enjoy, that I find fun, that can also get the job done? You know what I mean? Everything doesn't have to be a spreadsheet build, and I personally do not have like the spreadsheet build mindset unless I'm specifically going for one thing, like max damage on us all, you know what I mean? Certain builds like that are fun for me, but maximizing your efficiency in this game so you can create a spreadsheet build will never be as fun as a build that is made for fun, you know what I mean? And it can get the job done on top of that. Come on now, like that's just the best of both worlds. I feel like this build represents that quite well, and I wanted to go over that before explaining the Shadows of the Dead ability, because you're probably gonna hear me explain why I brought this ability and be like, yeah, I still feel like you could have replaced it with something else. That's cool, you're entitled to have your own opinion about this build. Yeah, but just know that this still got me to level cap, and I'm still gonna build in the way I want. And I feel like, again, everybody plays the game like that. Am I wrong? Clearly I'm wrong, but hey, you get my point. We build for fun around here. If you don't like what I build, you're entitled to feel like that all you want. I personally am gonna keep building it the way I want, especially if it works for me. But let's go ahead and talk about the Shadows of the Dead ability and the Shield of Shadows augment mod. So Shadows of the Dead allows you to summon back the enemies that you have recently killed with Nekros. Of course, prioritizes the strongest group among the enemies that you killed, and using the ability gives the summons an extra multiplier to their health, their shields, and their damage. So thanks to that bonus, the summons you create are gonna be much stronger than the enemies you just killed, despite the fact that their level is around the same range. And for those of you who don't know, the Shadows actually have a raised threat level, which means the enemies around you are going to focus their attacks more on the Shadows than they are on you, which is really useful for something like a Void Cascade, because you're going to be dealing with possessed Exilizers pretty often and Thrax that are going to be taking them over occasionally. So having summons to distract the enemies around you while you purely focus on the objective is really nice, and it can help you survive a lot. And whenever you have the augment mod with this ability as well, every time you take damage as Nekros, a percentage of that that damage will be redirected to any active shadow you have with the 4th ability. So not only do you redirect all types of damage from any sources, you also redirect all status effects. And that's the main reason why I have this augment mod and this ability in the first place. Shadows of the Dead provides summons that get stronger as I go up in rounds and the enemy level increases. And then as long as they're connected to me, the Shield of Shadows augment mod is going to make sure that I am immune to all types of status effects and that I have damage redirection. But I want to talk about damage reduction and damage redirection because, fun fact, the damage redirection does technically classify as damage reduction. And when it comes to damage reduction in Warframe, at the lower levels, it's still pretty decent. It can definitely help you survive a little bit longer. However, damage reduction falls off very quickly compared to a lot of other forms of survivability in the game. It's different on an arcane persistence build because no matter what type of damage you take, the maximum amount of damage you can take from all sources is only 500. So if you don't have that arcane on, you don't get that guaranteed damage reduction luxury. And fun fact, the damage redirection is capped at 90% on Nekros anyway, and after my mod setup, I can only get a maximum of 77% damage redirection. So that's 77% damage reduction for me. So why on earth would I even have this if that's the only amount of damage reduction I can get? And why have it in the first place if damage reduction falls off? That's because, like I said earlier, having multiple forms of survivability is better than having none. AKA the more the merrier in this case. So even if damage reduction falls off after a certain point, it's still going to be useful up until a certain point. You know what I mean? But again, it will inevitably fall off no matter how good damage reduction is. And you could really start to see this, for example, when I'm at the higher rounds. I'm talking over round 25. I'm constantly moving, constantly trying to go invisible with the atomic cycle, and I'm not relying on my damage reduction at all. The main things I'm relying on are the invisibility with the atomic cycle, and then of course the shield gating that naturally keeps me alive with my abilities. However, I'm also relying mainly on good movement, making sure I'm not standing still so I, don't take a lot of damage at once, and then making sure I'm maintaining my energy so I can spam my abilities as much as I need to, especially when I want to reuse Shadows of the Dead, so I can get that guaranteed immunity to status effects. The problem with this is very obvious though. The summons at the higher level, no matter how strong they are after the multiplier bonuses, they're still gonna die very quickly. As you can see, it does not take long for my summons to die after I resummon them because the damage the enemies are doing is absolutely insane. Even if the summons can do an insane amount of damage on their own, that does not mean they're gonna survive as long as they were, at round 1. This is round 25, we're fighting enemies that are way over level 1000, and needless to say, I'm struggling just to survive. But that's the fun in this whole challenge, you know what I mean? And the fact that I was able to get all the way to level cap with this build was just pretty awesome. So despite everything that I could have replaced for this build to make it easier, to make the run smoother, and just to overall make the build more efficient, I still got it done with this build despite the chaos that ensued throughout the run. But yeah, despite the fact that this is a pretty silly little Nekros build that is definitely not as good on paper compared to some other builds, I was still able to make her work all the way to level cap, and that's good enough for me. That's pretty much going to be it for this video. I'm really curious to see what you guys think. I know I made a video talking about me going to level cap with Nekros, but in that video I talked specifically more about the setup and I didn't really showcase a lot of footage. So this time around I wanted to showcase some footage of me actually going to level cap with the Nullstar helmet ability, and I wanted to focus more on Nekros himself this time compared to talking about the rest of the build, like my weapons and everything like that. If you're curious on the full loadout that I brought, you can check out that other video. It'll be linked in the description. Before this video ends, real quick, just wanted to say thank you guys so much for all the support on the channel. I literally just got back to making videos and you guys are already showing a lot of support. Even if you don't watch every video, I still appreciate the time you take to watch any of my videos regardless. That's going to be it for me. Thanks for watching. Keep your head up, stay positive. With all that being said, have a good one. I think that's it. There it is, 107 and finna be 108. Oh, let me see the level. Let me see some enemy level here so I can confirm it. I got an energy orb too. I'm summoning the squad. Fuck that. Okay. My summons are level 8,000, yo. Holy shit. All right, is this guy level 9,999? Yes, I did it, yo. Let's go. Get me out. Get me out. I don't care. I did it. Yes. Let's go. Level cap with Nekros, baby.